Here's the first story from the Daily Mail. Army sergeant is convicted of murdering Black Lives Matter protester by shooting him dead during July 2020 riots in wake of George Floyd murder. Daniel Perry, 37, a 37-year-old Uber driver and Army sergeant, was driving through downtown Austin on the night of July 25th, 2020. He ended up in the middle of a BLM march and in an altercation with protester Garrett Foster. Full stop. That's not what happened. Daily Mail's wrong. Foster just walked up to his car with a rifle, pointed it at him, and then this guy fired back. That's it. He didn't yell at him or anything. Nobody was yelling. Perry shot Foster dead, claimed it was self-defense, but on Friday, a jury found him guilty of murdering Foster. There's a few key details which need to be mentioned. First, I will say there is a widespread push from tons of conservative personalities calling on Greg Abbott to pardon this man, and I agree. Not like this guy. Look, this guy certainly said some things that I find questionable in the past, but that has no bearing on the fact that he's an Uber driver. He's wearing shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops, and a guy wearing a vest with a rifle and a mask marching with BLM points a gun at him, and then he fires in self-defense. If they were going to say, reckless endangerment or something, I'd roll my eyes and be like, well, they're getting him, whatever. But murder and life in prison, that's what they're going for. They say he was driving through, found himself in the midst of a protest, blah, 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 blah. Let me scroll down. Defense lawyers said that Foster raised his AK-47 at Perry and that Perry fired in self-defense. Witnesses have said during the trial that Foster never raised his rifle at Perry. Well, of course, the witnesses are BLM protesters. Of course, they are likely to lie. A jury found him guilty. In their closing arguments, they insisted he had no choice but to shoot Foster 5 times as he approached Perry's car with an AK-47. Prosecutors said Perry had plenty of choices, including driving away. Full stop. How many stories have we heard where people who drove away were accused of hit and run or something because people are banging on their car? Right. So did he? And they opened fire on him. I don't care. If you were rioting and you're carrying weapons and you approach someone and they panic because you're pointing a weapon at them, sorry. And of course, I just don't believe the BLM people. However, they say Perry also said that in Texas, you could get away with shooting them. They mentioned his social media posts. That's probably what got him. You should not say that stuff. Perry's phone showed he was texting a woman shortly before the encounter with Foster. The woman he wanted to meet up with sent him a text asking for money. This is an age-old story about a man who couldn't keep his anger under control. It's not about police. It's not about protest marchers. It is. There's video. I'm not going to play the video. But look, people have a right to keep and bear arms. People have a right to march down the street with those weapons. You don't have a right to be part of a group that has committed several acts of terrorism over the previous days, and then surround someone's vehicle while pointing a rifle at them. That's just that you've crossed the line. And so my response to all this is, it's a horrible story. I wish it didn't happen. It sucks. But how is putting this guy in prison going to solve anything?
It's a sensitive story, and I don't have a lot of data on this. Really what it comes down to is this guy pointing the gun at him or not. And we only have witness testimony. Because if he has the gun and it's like at an angle pointing right past the guy and he's moving towards the guy, it could give the illusion that he's pointing towards him. But and I don't know how far away were the witnesses.
All the testimony I've seen is that he approached the car.
How do you get him on murder?
Because of the idea that he premeditated it or had intent with that post on social media.
And so let me read this. Protesters didn't know anything about Perry when they attacked the car and boxed it in, said Doug O'Connell, who was defending Perry. O'Connell argued that Foster was dressed for battle at the protest, including wearing a neoprene vest, carrying an AK-47, a club, and a knife. Perry was wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. Garrett Foster is dressed for war. Daniel Perry is dressed for the beach. Murder means intent. If they want to say reckless endangerment or negligent homicide, I'd be sitting there and we'd be arguing the legal merits. No, they convicted him for intentionally going to this guy and killing him.
I think because as you're bringing up with the social media posts and they were trying to say, he wanted this chance to do what he did. I think what it actually shows is his mindset is like, oh my gosh, look how scary these rioters are, these looters are, the different social media posts that he had. So when he turns the corner, and I think during the trial it came out that there was evidence that his car was slowing because all the witnesses, as to your point earlier about the witnesses saying, well, he didn't point the gun. Well, the witnesses also said that he sped up into them. And I think they said, oh, we just heard tires screeching and this and that. But then I think the evidence of the trial showed that his car was decelerating, correct?
Decelerated to let a quadriplegic woman use the crosswalk.
They are lying.
So he turns into and he's like, oh my gosh. And his mindset is, I've been following this for months now. How scary. I don't want to be the next guy to die. Oh my gosh, a gun's in my face now. I think that more accurately describes why he has those past social media posts rather than what the prosecutors are trying to say is that, oh, he's a bad man looking for a fight.
And other witnesses have testified that they had called the cops saying this group is carrying guns. We've asked them to leave. We can't do anything. I mean, all the outlets are describing it as like, they were marching. Everything's fine. But like, put yourself back into this summer of 2020. It was an extremely turbulent and violent times in major cities across America. And people who were sort of caught in the crosshairs, residents who lived in the area, just had to wait and hope that nothing that fatal would happen. And unfortunately, in this case, it did.
And I wonder if his defense was smart enough to bring up this story from Deseret. Police arrest 2 after man shot during Provo protest. That's right. BLM ran up to a truck for no reason, literally none. This wasn't a truck driver chasing anybody down. It was a guy driving down the street. BLM extremists ran up and shot the guy in his car. June 30th, 2020. And they say 2 people were arrested Tuesday night in connection with the shooting of a motorist. About 1 month later, this Army sergeant was driving down the street in Austin when he was approached by a guy with a gun and shot back. And that context, I think, is extremely important for the jury to understand. This faction of individuals, their ideology, they have been committing acts of terror. They have been killing people. And only a couple of weeks ago, walked up to a motorist and shot him. And here I am in my car, is what I'd say. And they were walking up to me and I said, here we go again. That's the gun. He points it at me. But you know what? It doesn't matter because they're in Austin. And I think I find it laughable that people are like, you got to move to Austin, man. And I was like, no, you don't. You do not want to live in these places. You will go to prison when they try to kill you and you try to defend yourself.
Yeah, and it seems so obvious that it was self-defense in this particular instance. But what I would like to know is there's been other pretty egregious police killings of litany of minorities as well as white people since the Biden administration came to power. You have not heard from Black Lives Matter in terms of protests and riots and things like that. And what that tells me is that it was catalyzed somehow. And we still don't have answers as to how that came to pass. And I would like to know.
You mean the riots of 2020 was catalyzed?
Yeah, the whole summer, man. It was crazy. It was like it was basically 100 days of just misery and insanity. And I just don't buy the organic nature of that. And for the life of me, I wish OAN or some organization that's actually interested in getting to the truth would dig into that, because it seems like there's a story there and I don't know what it is.
What were you going to say?
Go ahead.
Oh, you're going to be much more interesting than me, man.
I was just going to say, on one point, yes, it kind of reads like, color revolutions and stuff, where these big moneyed interests that they go out there and they're able to kind of fund and they can kind of put money into it. They can kind of get people amped up and out there on the streets. I think Foster was on the streets, every day pretty much for a month or two. Yeah, exactly. So he kind of was like a full-time protester / rioter at that point. One thing that I do think is interesting to perhaps bring up here is that I think reporting says he was a Boogaloo boy, right? The Foster guy. So I know they have big gun control culture, right? However, he was rolling with BLM. And of course, we saw a lot of that kind of, mix in the summer of 2020 with the riots. But it's interesting to me because with BLM and other left-wing groups, one of their hallmarks is pushing for gun control. And it's interesting that it's only specific groups. It's only like law-abiding regular Americans that they want gun control for. You see the Chaz, for example, Antifa and other related group, Johns Browns clubs, the rest. It's interesting that when they set up their little Chaz, what did they first do? They erected a border. They patrolled that border with armed guards and they deported anyone they didn't like from the area. And you see that over and over and over with these groups. So when they say gun control, they don't really mean gun control. They just want to be the ones with the guns and the people they don't like not having the guns. In this case, Foster and friends having guns and the Perry and his friends not having guns.
Boom. And then we saw in Wisconsin when BLM protesters cheered and clapped as a man was arrested in his own home. I thought they were supposed to be against the cops. Right. No. When the police come and arrest you, they are clapping for it. Mm-hmm. That's where we're going. That's where we are. Yeah.
Disturbing.
So what are the odds, you think, that Abbott steps up and does something about this?
I think it's actually pretty high. Because look, this is violent extremists. They've killed other people before. There's 20 plus deaths. There's 19 plus deaths directly tied to the protest, and an estimated 32 in the periphery of the riots. I shouldn't say protests, riots. This guy in his shorts and t-shirt, convicted of murder? Something's wrong here. Abbott needs to just, pardon.
Yeah. Well, let me say one quick thing in defense of the Boogaloo Boys, which will be very unpopular. But many of them are libertarians, and many of them are hard 2A guys, and many of them were out there just to defend the protesters from the police. However, if you're going to approach someone and you're protesting in the middle of the street and you have a vehicle that is now stopped and surrounded and you approach them with an AK-47 or whatever sort of assault rifle, well, I don't even want to say assault rifle, the scary looking guns, not a good idea.
It's not just that. The Boogaloo Boys have been praised for they're not directly Antifa or BLM.
No, they're not.
But if you are marching with Antifa and BLM, there's no distinction. Yeah. Sorry, these people have firebombed buildings. They have killed people. Michael Reinhold in Portland with a BLM communist tattoo on his neck shot Aaron Danielson twice in the chest. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to march with these people. Yeah. It's like, well, with a rifle, and you point it at someone, and people are pointing on the chat. There's a video of him holding the weapon at high ready. He's got the gun ready to go.
If a guy approaches you at high ready with a rifle at high ready, man, in the middle of a riot, and you're stuck and you can't move, you've got to assume the worst. What choice? I'm not trying to incite stuff, but like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? You have to protect yourself. Yeah, you can either just put your hands down and stick your chest out right at the tip of his gun, maybe. But like, what's the other choice here?
No, consider
hit the gas.
Consider the options. Exactly. You have to hit the gas, drive through, in which case you're going to get an attempted homicide charge.
Yep.
Or you fire, in which case you're charged with murder and apparently convicted. Or you just cross your fingers and hope that the dude's not going to fire back.
But this is beyond just happening to somebody in a vehicle with BLM. We saw the parking garage attendant in New York,
right,
who a guy literally shot him twice. Fighting for his life, this man wrestles the gun away and then shoots the would-be murderer. And then he wakes up being criminally charged with attempted murder in a hospital after nearly dying. And he's crying. He was crying in bed saying, I don't understand. This is a nightmare. What's happening? Why are they doing this to me? Because they're evil people. They are evil. There's no question. I'm sorry, Ian. It is a fact. If a man is on his deathbed after being shot twice and he's crying saying, why God? It's because Bragg is an evil person. And the only reason he backed up that prosecution is because people who are good stood up and said, don't you try it. And then he backed up and said, no, okay, we're going to stop.
Do you think utilitarianism is evil in general?
Well, it's to a certain degree, but let me make this point. What's happening to this guy, Daniel Perry, I was surprised to find out the trial was going on. How did we not know about this? How is this story, which is similar to Kyle Rittenhouse, different in many ways, completely just under our...
Because there's no video. No video.
There is video of it.
What, is it good video? Is it enough to know what's going on?
No. I mean, from what I've read, everyone is saying it's not super clear. Even the police body cam footage responding to the incident is like a little ambiguous. I mean, the defense called their own ballistics expert to try and analyze the video. And I think that's one of the reasons that Kyle Rittenhouse was able to not get lost in sort of the immediate media backlash that would have inevitably followed him, because so many people could point to this video and say, look at it. Like, you can't spin this. It's pretty obvious what happened here.
Yeah. And look at this story from Deseret. How are we supposed to live in a country where you hear the news about BLM for no reason shooting a motorist who I believe was a woman? You can see it, and people are mentioning it in the chat. And then what do? You know what? Look, man, you want to live in Austin? Fine. At a certain point, I'm getting to the point where I'm going to be like, oh, did another person get convicted of murder for trying to save their own life? No sympathy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, dudes. Look, I'm not going to say it's not. I'm not going to say it's easy for a lot of people to get out of cities. Very, very hard. Very, very difficult. But I'm just at the point where I'm like, I mean, it's 3 years on. 3 years since the summer of love. And I've been saying even 2 years before that, you need to get out of these cities. They will do this to you. They will arrest you for what BLM does.
Yeah. If there's a Democrat DA, you're in trouble.
And there are people who are still like, I'll be fine. I'll keep my head down. It's like, okay, well, when that happens and they do come and arrest you, don't expect me to offer any assistance. Yeah.
Do you think one of the biggest things is because those who are on, I guess, right, libertarian, various assorted groups, is that we kind of don't like, state power so much. So it's more like elections come by, we're not as into it as, say, someone who is one of the left ideological, groups. So when local elections come around, we're not as mobilized and we're not as interested. Like you said with this trial, a lot of people weren't as paying attention to it as much. So I think that happens a lot because even if you get out of cities, you could be in a smaller town where, you know, everyone seems to be kind of maybe more conservative and you think, wow, I feel really safe here. Everyone supports law enforcement. And then before you know it, you didn't pay attention to your local elections. And now you're like, how come this DA is letting everyone out? How come my, you know, and on and on.
But the issue is it's not bad enough. And so there is one simple reality. If you are holding on to a skillet and it burns your hand, you will let go. The issue is the damage and destruction that is occurring in cities is not escalating to a point just yet where people are going to drop the pan, i.e. get out. Now let me give you an analogy, right? You grab you put on your oven mitts and you grab a tray of fudge brownies from the oven and you're holding on to it and you're trying to figure out where to put the brownies down and you can feel the heat is making its way through those mitts. What happens if you don't put it down right now? Eventually the mitts can't stop the heat. It burns your hand, you drop the pan, maybe it's Pyrex, it shatters on the ground, and now there's a disaster zone. Right. When instead you could have been like, okay, I got to just set this down anywhere I can set it down, it's getting too hot. What's happening right now is we're at that point. People are still in these cities, and we can feel the heat, but they're going, look, the heat that I'm feeling, the pressure that I'm feeling in the city does not reach a level where I'm willing to experience hardship to get out. Yeah. And I mean it, hardship. I'm not saying it's easy. It might be the most difficult thing you have ever done. But trust me, the people who have said to me, like, you look, man, I got a house, I can't sell it, I don't know how to move. Trust me, when bullets fly through your daughter's window, you will pack up and leave and go sleep under a bridge or something like that. You will be like, okay, that is too hot. And so my point is simply this. I'm not passing judgment. I'm simply saying I understand why people are not going to leave their homes until the bullets come through their windows. But you know what? It's already happened to a lot of people.
Yep.
And so, like that guy in Wisconsin, sooner or later, the cop will come to your house. They will search your home. They will charge you with whatever they want because you pissed off some BLM activist group because they know who you are. You watch this show. And then you're going to be like, it's too late now.
Yeah.
Now the DA is going to be like, Mr. Smith, don't leave the state. And you're going to be like, now what do I do?
I got to say real quick, I'm reading Scott Horton's pre-release of his new book. It's like 500 pages on the history between Russia and Ukraine. It's incredible. But the reason this correlates, and there is a correlation, he breaks down all of the color revolutions that happened through the Eastern Bloc nations that were CIA-backed. And I can't tell you how reminiscent it was of living through 2020. And it strikes me as a color revolution. I'm not saying it was one, but it felt a hell of a lot like one. When you read about them, it's crazy. It's uncanny, honestly.
What defines color revolution?
Usually they're labeled by a color. So it'll be like the orange or the rose or the red and things like that. So, but there's a litany of them that happen in Eastern Bloc nations, like the break-off nations from Russia after the fall of the USSR. And usually it deals with electoral processes that are manipulated in some fashion. I'm not saying that's what happened in America, but that is what the CIA was.
I want to read this comment from Vision Storm. He says, Tim, quote, I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying I have no sympathies if you have no means to leave your state. No, you completely misunderstand, perhaps intentionally. What I said is, for those who poo-poo the idea and say, it's not that bad, that is to whom I'm saying I have no sympathy if you've made this choice. Right. I'm also saying I understand for some people it is too difficult to do. It's very difficult. And then I'm also pointing out that at a certain point, it doesn't matter how difficult it is or the consequences, you will drop the tray, the glass will shatter, and it will create a problem for you. This is what I'm saying. If you are holding something too hot, shattering glass on the ground is the last thing you want to happen. If you are living in a house and you are like, I have nowhere to put this thing down, the moment BLM shows up to your house and sets a fire, you will flee your home with your kids, having no idea where you're going. It's not a question of your means to do so. It is a fact. If your life, your loved ones' lives are threatened, you will go and sleep in a tent in the woods before you let a violent mob kill you. That's it. I don't think there's any human being who's going to be like, oh, Antifa's here. What are they yelling? They want to kill me? I better just sit here. Especially when you have kids, you're going to be like, we're abandoning this right now.
It's got to go.
So my view is it may be the most difficult thing you have ever done. If it were me, I don't want to give anybody financial advice. If it were me, I would sell my house for whatever I could get for it and move out to the middle of nowhere. That being said, I am fully aware of when we moved out of Jersey, it wasn't the most difficult thing for us. You know, I had a successful YouTube channel. I had money that I'd saved up. And so after saving for about a year or two, and I'm like, I think we better get out of here before it's too late. So then we bought property out here in West Virginia, got a little tiny house somewhere, and then said, that's it. And then we moved out here, set up the company in what is now the Cast Castle, which is the company's. I don't live here. And that's the point. I understand. For me, it was much easier. And I moved much sooner than most people. But I do think sooner or later, if you do nothing, there will come a time when BLM will come up to your house. They'll be armed for some reason or another. Maybe you'll be at work and they're going to be, or maybe you got an American flag in the front of your house. They've already done this. BLM has already threatened people because they had American flags on their houses. Sooner or later in these cities, it will happen. You want to buy, my point to people is, if you could buy a lottery ticket and if you won the lottery on it, then they would put you in prison for life. Like that was the prize. The chances of it happening are very, very low. But would you buy the ticket? Anybody?
No.
So the chances of BLM actually showing up to your house in the immediate future right now and destroying it is a lottery ticket's chance. Okay. Over time, it's slowly becoming more and more likely. We are seeing more and more of this. Several years on now, they're putting people in prison after BLM attacked them.
Look at the Cash App founder, too, in San Francisco.
Exactly.
Do you think there was something to that? Because that was 2 a.m. You think he was doing a drug deal or something?
No.
Right outside?
He was that guy must have been worth $1 billion.
Was he walking home drunk? What was it, 2 a.m.? Why was he outside at 2 a.m. in San Francisco?
On a weekend?
Yeah.
Everybody's out at 2 a.m. on a weekend.
Drinking? Maybe
He
drinking.
was in San Francisco, was a major urban area.
Where he used to live. I mean, he could be coming home.
He was going to his
friend's
house. He was going to his apartment, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
He was at his apartment.
And it wasn't a bad area.
Yeah,
either.
and his family. What? Don't take that for real. I don't know what happened.
It's simple, bro.
2 a.m.
In New York, yes, 2 a.m. Bars close at 4.
Don't walk around in cities at 2 a.m., guys, unless you absolutely have to. Stick to the bright lit streets. Walk fast, like you're the one that's dangerous, and get to your destination.
And think about
look
what you're saying.
360 as much as you can.
Think about what you're saying.
That's how you got to live in a city, man. It's dog eat dog.
Or you get out because...
Or get out if you can.
It's insane.
It's beautiful out in the open.
Yeah.
It is insane that we've gotten to the point where it's like, if you go out at 2 a.m. in a city, you might die.
Yeah, that's not.
And then here's the best part. The person who did it is going to get let go.
Yeah, you can't trust that there'll be any justification. I think the big thing you have to be conscious of that the water is boiling, right? Like, true, you may not lose everything today, but do you want to be in the place most likely to be the next epicenter of one of these riots?
Of course.
Probably not. And it is difficult to leave, but make it a priority. Like, this is something that you maybe need to make a goal.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.